Okay, so welcome to T.A.M. Tonight we're joined by Cyrus Cummings, who is with Runway Recovery, and he serves as a client care coordinator. We were first blessed to hear from Cyrus last summer, and he shared with us his journey and path to recovery. He told us his story of how he took his first drink at the age of 13, and although his parents knew, he still hid his addiction from the ages of about 13 to 19 years old. But tonight we're going to focus on how his parents handled the situation with his addiction and how they navigated the lonely and tumultuous journey, just like we are here today. So keep that in mind as he shares how his parents, just like many of us in this group, still are today. And we can gain some further insight as parents of addicted loved ones. So, with that, Cyrus, thank you again for being here with us tonight. And I'm going to turn this over to you, and you can take it away.
Thank you. It's nice to hear that I retold my story last time well because of how nervous I think I was the first time. So, again, thank you for having me. I chose the topic of the role of family in addiction because I think my family handled my recovery really well. I think in my active addiction, you had mentioned it and I mentioned it before. They didn't get to see much of it. I stayed out of the picture for most of my active using. So the time where they had to really get involved was in my early recovery. And I talked to my mom about what she did that helped her get through it and the emotions that she was going through. And she said just what she said. She said it was really lonely. I have two siblings, but I'm the oldest. And um, I asked like, what do you think, helped with you? And she said she attended support groups, so that's why I think I have such a like an appreciation for this group. And from my perspective, what my mom and my dad did to help me in my recovery, I think the most important thing they did was they knew that me not being around might have been best for me, and that I think that broke my mom's heart, especially my mom. My dad um, hides his emotions well, but my mom shows them. And I told her one day, my mom wants me home, and I told her I was like, hey, I think it's best for me to stay out in Costa Mesa with the people that I got sober with, and she cried obviously, but she said, as long as you're happy and you think it's gonna help you stay sober, then that's what I want you to do. And that was really comforting. Uh, that I think without that kind of support, because obviously my mom wanted me around, but more than wanting me around, she wanted me to be sober and happy. And what was really challenging in the beginning was coming back home around my family. I spent 5 months in treatment. I took my first overnight to go see them when I had around 2 months sober. And the thing that I really appreciated is that they held firm boundaries with me. I learned in treatment how to hold boundaries with them. I said, I can't be calling you every day while I'm in treatment. I need to be focusing on myself and on their end, they were receptive of that. And then when I went home, they reinforced things like, we want you to be home at this time. We want you to come to this with us. We want you to come to dinner with us because I'm very much so someone when I go home or when I would go home, I'd still like to go out and do things. And it was a habit for me to still kind of ignore my family. And they've held a firm boundary with me. They said, if you're here, we want you to be here. You know, as frustrating as it was for me when I was out late at night, they would tell me to come home. And I thought that it was them thinking of me as the old Cyrus instead of the one that had changed. But looking back, it's something that I really appreciated because it showed consistency on their part. They had a set, number of rules and they expected me to follow it. And in that sense, I felt comfort being at home because I knew what to expect. I think another thing that really helped me was I think them just being open with talking about it. My family is like I said, they didn't they didn't know what I was going through, and they were willing to learn as well. Uh, it was I think it was embarrassing for them to have the kid who was an alcoholic and an addict, but they asked me questions about what do you need from us, and a lot of the times the answer was that I didn't need anything from them, but the it was the effort that they showed me that they wanted to help, and that's what was really comforting. And now my relationship with my family is really good. They're out in Texas. We were talking about this earlier. My family moved out to Texas, but I call them all the time. Like my parents are very much so a part of my life. They came out to watch me take my 2-year trip recently, which was really nice. And I think the thing that helps them today and really helps me is I have learned to respect them again. And I think they show me respect in the same way that they know I'm not going to be perfect, and I know they're not either, but we're both working to have a healthy relationship with each other. And I think effort is the most important part. Um, I don't have much more on this topic. It's more of a thing for me to ramble on about. So if there's any questions, then I'd love to answer them.
Yeah, well, a lot of what you said is for me goals because I you're so kind and your family seems extremely kind, but I'm just going to speak for myself and I'm going to be upfront and honest. I wasn't always so nice, Cyrus, with my
Yeah.
son. And that was at probably the height of being just so distraught, didn't know what to do, didn't know where to go, losing control, didn't know how to handle that. And so I was not as maybe as understanding at first as
Mhm.
what it sounds like your family was, um, to be able to do that. But when you were younger and this was going on, like you started your first, you said you had your first drink at 13.
Mhm.
And so through that 6 year window where you were hiding it, even though they really knew,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So were there altercations there? Um, in the home where they knew you were, or was it a discussion, or how did that come about?
Yeah, so I remember the first time that in my mind I had really slipped up was again, like you said, like they had known long before, but uh, I had said something like really, really awful to my mom, and she, I try to be as respectful to my mom as possible. And sitting here, like you said, it may sound like it's very nice, but I was wildly disrespectful to my parents while I was intoxicated. And it got to the point where she had slapped me and I grabbed her hand and I said, like, don't you ever hit me like that again. And it put she like broke down. She was like, I'm afraid of my son. And that was a it's a unexplainable feeling, like as the son of someone who does that to their mom. And I think the worst part that is that after that I still didn't have the courage to change. I think that's what's so awful about addiction, that I think all mothers experience, is that like I put my mom through this horrible experience, and then I bawled to her. I said I'm sorry, and I meant it at the time, but I kept putting her in that situation. And the conversation around that was, like, Cyrus, we don't want you doing this in the house anymore. And I swore to them, I
Right.
was like, yeah, yeah, you're right. I won't do it anymore. That was an awful and terrible thing. And the only thing that changed is I tried to stay away from them more.
Right. Well, that's kind of what I was getting at. Is okay, these people are saints if they were so calm throughout this whole thing.
No,
And I was like,
they
oh my gosh, maybe I shouldn't share my story.
no,
Um,
they were very calm in the recovery portion because, like I said, I think they found a group of people that they could connect with, and
mhm.
why this
But
is
during active
important.
addiction is what
Yeah,
I'm talking about. So, like you
yeah,
mentioned that incident, which I can speak for me. It's happened to me and my son. Um, horrible things have been said. So it's good to know. And I know you don't want to air everything about what your mom said or your dad
Yeah,
said or anything like that. I get that. But it is comforting to know that the story is still pretty much the same as what we've gone through. And I know sometimes it's worse for a loved one who is homeless, and we don't know what's going on. But then it's just as bad to have an active addict living in the home. And that's, where that tension comes from with that, probably that situation with you and your mom. So
yeah. And
I'm totally in.
I had written that line very well. I don't know if I brought this up last time, but I'll bring it up this time. I was getting to a point where I was very abusive to my brother. Like I lived at home with my brother and my little sister, and I was very like verbally and physically abusive to my brother. And it got to the point where they had sat me down and said, if these behaviors don't change, you can't live here anymore. And it was kind of the point of we don't know, we don't have a place for you, but we know you can't be here. And so, as a saint-like as it may have sounded, I think I
No.
forget what it was like going through that until I sit here and can kind of talk about
Right.
it.
Right. Because your head is clear and you can put that
Yeah,
into perspective, right?
yeah,
So, so when were you actively using in your home,
yeah. I
in their home?
yeah, I would. I mean, my dad had a minor surgery done, and they overprescribed him, from what I think, Vicodin. And shocker, all of his Vicodin went missing in a week. And I told them I didn't know what happened to it. And looking
You're
back
sticking
now,
to it.
yeah, looking back now, they were like, "Oh, you definitely took that, didn't you?" And it's like, "Yeah, I did. I had a minor chest surgery, and they prescribed me Norcos, and I abused those in the house. I was drinking in the house. I brought a lot of things into that house that, like you said, they didn't know about, but it was obvious that I was doing them.
Right. They could tell.
Yeah,
Right. Okay, so let's see some of these comments that we have. Okay, Betsy says, my daughter always said I was her biggest support. She chose to leave family over a year ago. What do you say to those of us who have no contact with their addicts? And she says she also has refused recovery, but thinks abstinence is recovered, or refuses recovery, but thinks abstinence is recovery. So, what do you say about that she's her biggest support, but she chose to leave the family over a year ago? I mean, what's your thoughts on that? No
it's
contact.
it's a tricky, really, really tricky thing because for me, like there are some situations that I love to be in, but I can't put myself in because I know where it leads me. Right? Like first and foremost, my priority is my sobriety because if I'm around certain people, then I may not be able to stay sober. And no matter how much those people mean to me, if I can't stay sober, then I'm going to do things that show them they mean nothing to me because that's just
Right,
what I do in my active addiction.
right,
And on the flip side, I see a lot of, parents when they come into treatment and they're heartbroken over not being able to be with their children. And think the most important thing is I'd rather not be able to be present, but know I can be loving when the time arises, than be present and unable to be loving.
right, right. That's perfectly stated. Okay, so Sharon asks, were you ever homeless?
No, I was not ever homeless. I got to a point where I was spending a lot of time outside of my house, and my parents were worried about me, and they never knew where I was. Like I said, I got to a point where my family was about to ask me to leave their house, but it never got to the point where I was sleeping on the street. No.
So, was that at about the point where you made that decision to get help?
It was not. That was still
Okay,
not enough for me to go decide to get help. I just spent more time out of. That's all it was. I just said that if I hide it better, then they
right,
won't know. So
right.
that's what I did.
Okay. Okay, so a member asks, not sure what your feelings are about meetings. My son is not a big fan, but has a community of supportive friends. Meetings are not the end all, are they?
For me, I just honestly I attend 2 to 4 meetings a week. Two of them are mandatory for my house, and outside of that, I've found that there are times where I do need a meeting, right? There's a time and a place I believe for these meetings, and they serve a purpose. And I think your relationship with everything else is much more important than your relationship with meetings. Are you being of service? Are you helping other people? How is your own 12-step work going? And then you could look at meetings. I do think meetings are an important part of my recovery, so I can't speak to anybody else's. Um, but I would say that there are other things to consider, and for me, meetings are one of the three things that I try to do.
So you mentioned if you're doing your own 12-step work,
Yeah.
you don't it's it's not necessarily it's a personal choice whether you want to attend meetings to do that. But you can still do your own 12-step work and work a personal recovery program.
Yeah, and
Is that
your sponsor may tell you, my sponsor tells me to go to meetings. So that's just what I do. I know some people who have time sober that don't go to as many meetings, but the common thread is that they all do go to meetings. To the extent
so
of what it is different.
so so two of them you said are mandatory and then you choose to do two additional because you
Yeah,
feel like you need them. Now, when you say you feel like you need them, is that because you feel like it gives you that extra strength?
that's exactly what it is. Yeah. It's
Okay, so it's
I
not
know that
about the people there or the camaraderie or a family type of thing that you've joined in those groups or
for me there's something special about just going to an outside meeting. I have the two ones at home, and there's something so irreplaceable about going to an outside meeting and
Mhm.
hearing somebody speak who has 15 years sober, or just hearing a bunch of people speak and they're just sharing how they're struggling, and it's nothing more than just I'm glad I'm not the only one struggling right now. In
Right.
that sense, it's irreplaceable for me.
Absolutely. Okay. Y'all, we got just a few more minutes if y'all want to come up with a couple of questions. And Cyrus, I was going to ask you, I know you, from 13 to 19, you were hiding it, or you thought you were hiding it, and then went into recovery, correct? So
Yeah.
how old are you now? How long have you been in recovery?
I just turned 22 and I just picked up my 2-year chip.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. My
That's
family.
amazing. I would have, if that was my son, I would have it bronzed and put on a pendant, and I would just never ever take it off. So
Yeah.
that's
They
super proud of
basically.
you.
My little
That's
sister has my
amazing.
1-year chip. It's people they sound very nice, and my parents, like you said, they seem like saints, but they fly out from Texas to California to watch me take this chip. I think because to other people it's obvious that, like, oh my God, he must have put them through so much that they're gonna fly out to come see him take this chip.
My son has gotten the 30-day, and I think is there a 3-month one? I
Yeah,
think. And those are the two that I have, and I will never ever get rid of them. Although he's relapsed since
yeah,
then, but I'm just keeping them.
yeah.
Okay, so Julie says my son hates meetings. He um, has once a month and once a week, but has made the comment is that all you ever think about is meetings and what I am doing outside of work. I believe he is going to the methadone clinic. He's 43. Okay, let me reread this. My son hates meetings. He has a once a month and once a week, but has made the comment is that all you ever think about is meetings. I guess that's him speaking to Julie. And what am I doing outside of work? I believe he is going to the methadone clinic. He's 43. So maybe the question, Julie, is that if he's going to the methadone clinic, are you concerned that he's not in recovery, or not sure what the question was there? Yes. Okay. So her concern is if he's going to the methadone clinic, that he
Mhm.
may not be in recovery.
I think this kind of touches on what maintenance is. I think you said that that's another hot topic going around right now. And I think maintenance gives people a better chance at sobriety. I like the way our brains work through all of this drug abuse and trying to quit them completely. Your brain just goes absolutely nuts. And so to have these medications that can help your brain kind of level out so you can focus on therapy and groups and treatment, I think that it is genuinely saving lives
Hmm.
when it's used in its proper application.
Right.
I
And that
absolutely believe that that's recovery.
I do too. And Kim asked the question right below that, which kind of carries into that. Does Runway support MAT,
Yeah,
medication assisted treatment?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. There's a, like I said, it's an, it's a disease that you can't afford not to use everything you can to fight it.
Absolutely.
And that's
MAT
what,
definitely saves lives.
yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so Kelly says my son is 9 days sober and went to 7 meetings, but hasn't gone the last 2 days. I don't want to be a nag, but I do think he should be attending. He has tried several times to keep himself sober, but he doesn't often make it. Do you have any suggestion on how I should approach this?
Uh, it's a little too, I don't know much about your son's individual case, so I can't necessarily speak to it. But I think if meetings are important to him and it's what works, then I think it's a matter of A, letting him know that you care, and B, just, if it's important to him and it's important to you, then it's what we should be doing.
And it looks like he went to Kelly. It looks like he's 9 days sober and he's went to seven.
Yeah,
So 7 in 9 days is really well.
yeah.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of our questions and comments, Cyrus. And just thank you once again for giving us your time. We always enjoy having you, and your story is awesome. And we really appreciate the work you're doing for Runway Recovery. So we're glad you're here. And Runway is one of our TAM heroes, and we
Yeah.
just appreciate all of you. So, again, thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you for letting me be here. I'm glad you saw my story wasn't all rainbows and butterflies.
Right?
Yeah.
I was thinking, oh my goodness.
No.
No, that's awesome. We appreciate you, Cyrus, so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.